Hey folks, Nathan here from the Star Wars Timeline Gold, Star Wars Beyond the Films, and Cloud City Casino, a Star Wars gaming podcast over at StarWarsReport.com. Taking a look here at the new source book for the Star Wars role-playing game for Fantasy Flight Games. This is the first of their non-specific RPG books, an era source book called Dawn of Rebellion. This is basically designed to give us information that shifts the setting of the role-playing game back by a couple of years. Most of the Fantasy Flight role-playing game materials assume that it is shortly after the Battle of Yavin. This book has a present that's more around about 2 years prior to the Battle of Yavin. It focuses primarily on information from Star Wars Rebels, but does include some information relating to Rogue One. Character profiles will tend to be from Rebels, though, not from Rogue One, because Rogue One will not quite have happened yet as of the present of most of this book, for what it's worth. And notice here it does say Star Wars. I said it's a non-specific source book. It just says Star Wars role-playing in the corner. You flip to the back, and it does point out that this is designed to be used with Edge of the Empire and Age of Rebellion and Force and Destiny. It can work for all three, and they do take time to say at certain points that, hey, you know, if you're playing this particular game, you wouldn't have run into this particular mechanic because it's from this other version of the game. Well, don't worry. All that is going to be explained in here. So if there's something that was from one game but not all the games, or from two games but not all three, they do make a point of explaining that mechanic, so you don't have to go out and buy the other core rulebook from the other game you haven't been playing to be able to use the information that's in here, which is a fairly nice touch. You have an introduction here, opening comments, forward by Dave Filoni. It gets into sort of explaining what the setting itself is like, and then we get a section called Worlds in Revolt. Now, Worlds in Revolt basically is a quick profile of a handful of planets that are mainly relative to the Rebels TV series, and it gives us a sense of characters who are there, including known faces like, you know, with Alderaan, you get a profile for Leia and things like that. We have Atollon with Chopper Base. Each one also tends to have a modular encounter of some kind, although the one for the Death Star is actually based on Scarif. So we have, let's see, Dathomir. We've got the Death Star, as I said, fairly lengthy section for it that winds up including Scarif. We have Jeddah, yet still no exact date on when the Empire came there. We have Lothal, of course, then a small section on other worlds like the Anaxes asteroid belt, where we find Fort Anaxes, Gorel, Malachor, the Ring of Kafrene, Selos, and Shantipole. Then we jump to organizations. Again, this is an era in which the Rebel Alliance isn't much of a Rebel Alliance yet. It's a bunch of separate cells, so we have sort of a different concept to many of the organizations. We have the Empire focused on, it's broken down into focuses on the Imperial military and different parts of it, what to expect from the different academies. Lots of good organizational information for those who are interested in the Empire to be found here. We then have the Rebellion, what exists of it, how it is divided at this point, a little bit of information about the Fulcrum agents and so forth, a focus on Phoenix Cell in particular, and that's when we're going to get our profiles of various members like Kanan, Sabine, and so forth here. Independent organizations also show up, things like the Broken Horn Syndicate, the Protectors of Concord Dawn, and then some individuals like Ketsu Onyo, a little bit on Lando Calrissian, and unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on if you like the character, I kind of hate him, the character of Az Morgan. Then we have new player options that are presented. The 4 new species are actually all from Rogue One, which is kind of a departure from the rest of this book, where most is from Rebels. We have the Drabatans, Gegorans, the Iakaru, and the Tognath as our 4 new species, each of which has some new information about their planets beyond what we've seen in previous guides. Then we have new universal specializations that wind up costing as much to use as a career specialization, but actually isn't a career specialization per se. They work slightly differently, but not by much. We have the Force Adherent. We have the Imperial Academy Cadet, the Padawan Survivor, the Pirate, the Retired Clone Trooper, interesting information about the inhibitor chips in here after Order 66, the Ship Captain. Then we have what are called new skills here, but it opens up the section by saying that this section includes or contains 2 skills not found in all 3 Star Wars role-playing game rulebooks. So we're talking about 2 that actually show up in some of them, not all of them, so here they are presented, so they're new depending on which game you're actually playing. Then we have new talents, as one would expect, new weapons, primarily focusing on weapons that we see in Rogue One, new droids and so forth, new vehicles, again, primarily Rogue One stuff, but a little bit from Rebels in those cases. And then we get to a really good chapter here that I think is one of the better written ones for game masters here, for game master support. And it's specifically to the idea of when you're setting up your campaigns, how to set them up as seasons, how to develop ongoing story arcs, and how to alternate different focuses, as you go along within your season and your campaign to change things up and yet still have a solid through line. And that is further developed when looking at the way an antagonist would be developed throughout a campaign. Not just being someone that you deal with in one battle and they're always kind of the same, but building them, building the anticipation, building the major confrontations leading to a grand finale. And then, since you'll be dealing mainly with Rebel cells rather than the Rebel Alliance proper when dealing with Dawn of Rebellion, it gets specifically into dealing with Rebel cells and how to work them into the game, since it may not work quite like a typical Rebel Alliance division that you might be playing as, say, in Age of Rebellion. So for those who play the Star Wars RPG, this is a fantastic guide. It's not going to be as useful to you if you have already started a campaign and you plan to keep everything in the post-Yavin era. But if you're just starting out a new campaign, if you want to go back and maybe do a flashback campaign with some of your characters or similar characters to the ones you have, or family members or whatever, to create some background for your existing characters, this is a pretty cool one to pick up, and hopefully we'll be seeing more of these generalized source books that are able to work with all three games without a lot of tweaking, and that try to make sure that you have everything that you need to play with that guide with any of the three without having to buy any extra core rulebooks. Kind of wish they had done this sooner, but better late than never, right? So a good one to pick up. Dawn of Rebellion, just keep in mind, it is a pre-Yavin setting.